Good afternoon, good evening, Harlem and Harlems of the world. I'm Terri Wisdom, and this is Harlem Network News. Harlem Network News is a media platform. We started at the onset of COVID, and believe it or not, in 2020. It is now 2025, and we are still here. We are dedicated to assuring that Harlem and the Harlems of the world are informed, are engaged, and called to action. And this is certainly in this 2025 season, this is certainly a very critical thing. Okay, we're being called to action. You know, the circumstances that are happening in this world are calling us to action. And media is a very, very critical part of it, especially with a lot of the information that's so fluid. So we try to make sure that our people are clear so that we can have some control of our lives. So today, we have some very, very special guests with us. And what they're doing should resonate around the world. We have from Save Harlem, we have Valerie Jo Bradley, who is the co founder and president. And we also have with us Claudette Brady, who is the executive director, and that is of Save Harlem. So I'm going to start with Valerie Jo Bradley, and I just love saying that. Valerie Jo Bradley. And she is going to tell us who she is and who she is and what life journey brought her to create Save Harlem. So go ahead.
Thank you, Terry. Thank you, Terry, for inviting Save Harlem Now with an
Oh,
exclamation
all
point
right. Okay, Save Harlem.
uh, to join you today. Um, as you said, my name is Valerie Jo Bradley, and I have been a Harlem resident for 50 years now. And I moved here to take a position as Andrew Young's spokesperson at the United Nations mission to the UN. I was his spokesperson, and my title was Deputy Counsel for Press and Public Affairs. That's what brought me here. I had been in San Francisco, um, where earlier I had gone to graduate school at UC Berkeley in journalism. And then subsequent to leaving Berkeley, I moved to San Francisco and I was the executive director of the United Way of the Bay Area. Prior to that,
Right. All right.
prior to that, I had worked at the Jet magazine in Chicago, Illinois, after graduating from undergraduate school at Indiana University. I received a degree in journalism and English.
Okay.
So,
I'm sorry. I'm going to interrupt you because we want everybody to know everything here. So Jet Magazine.
Jet
Jet
magazine is
Magazine.
it's online now, I believe, but it was a Johnson publication. And it was the weekly publication, and people are probably as familiar with Jet and Ebony magazine. So Jet was the news magazine that featured news on a weekly basis. Ebony magazine was published on a monthly basis. Now, occasionally I wrote features and did interviews for Ebony magazine. And a cute little story is the person who was responsible for reviewing books that came into Ebony magazine engaged me in reading the books, and then I would
All
write the
right.
summaries for him. So that's how I got to read some incredible books without having to purchase them or having to
Mm.
go to the library, because I read the books and then did the reviews that were featured in the Ebony column about uh, significant books that touched on African American and diaspora, the African diaspora, books about the African
Okay.
diaspora. I would read those books and then write the reviews. But you know what's was interesting? It was a wonderful experience being at the United States Mission when I was, because that's the period when negotiations were being held for organizations like the ANC, the African National Congress, to get its into to when it was waging an armed struggle in South
Okay.
Africa, the Patriotic Front, which was waging an armed struggle in Zimbabwe,
All
uh,
right.
the the struggle for independence for Namibia, which at the time was called Southwest Africa and was primarily controlled by South Africa, and it got its independence. And so I was there during a very exciting period at the UN. But getting back to what brought me to New York was that job. And I did not have that much exposure to Harlem at the time because I lived downtown in on the east side near the
Okay.
UN. I lived
Wow.
on East 55th Street between
Okay.
Lexington and 3rd.
Okay.
But occasionally I would venture up to Harlem. I would go to the African record store. There was this great African record store, which was in the Renaissance, which has since
Hmm.
been demolished.
Okay.
And I would also visit Una Mozek's bookstore. You remember the name of that bookstore, Terry?
I don't know. I know there was the Liberation Bookstore.
That was it, the
Okay.
Liberation
Liberation
Bookstore.
Bookstore. Absolutely.
Liberation Bookstore. And her
Okay.
father had been a high official in Marcus Garvey's organization, the UNIA.
Okay.
And she had an incredible collection of books by African authors. And
Hmm.
so I love going to Liberation Bookstore, purchasing books, sitting and talking with her about the history she knew of the struggle, the Marcus Garvey struggle, as well as the history of Harlem as she knew it. And interesting people would come into the bookstore, all who had histories about Harlem and whatever. So it was like a real experience for me.
Yeah,
While
it
I
was
was
a
still,
place to go.
I always had a fascination with Harlem. I used to read Langston Hughes, Zora Neale Hurston, uh, other Harlem Renaissance writers. And as a teenager, I always felt I was going to move to Harlem. I wanted to move to Harlem. They made me want to be in Harlem because of the movements and the art and culture that they described in their books made me want to be here in Harlem. Um, so while I was still at the U.S. Mission, I purchased a brownstone in the Mount Morris Historic District and moved to Harlem.
All
Now
right. I love it.
the house was as raggedy as a can of yakame, and without any experience. I grew up in a house, but certainly I didn't renovate a house. I was a kid, you
Mhm.
know what I mean?
Yes.
I renovated that house. I bought the house by myself, and I renovated it as a single person, a single woman who was relatively young. I was in my early 30s,
Okay.
and I moved into the house, and that was started out as a economic venture, or like a real estate venture, ended
Hmm.
up into a love and romance with the community,
Hmm.
Harlem. I got involved with my neighbors. I ran uh, drugs off the block, organized people to run drugs off the block. I ended up being president of the Block Association, on a couple of occasions. I
Mm,
used to help people in the neighborhood fill out forms, fight their landlords when there was no heater, no, there was no hot water. I could read stuff and help them understand what the issues were and whatever. And I just, I bonded with the people on my block and even outside of my block. And I think I had been an organizer or a community activist when I lived in the San Francisco Bay Area, because
mm,
that's when I began working politically with people like Ron Dellums, who
mm.
was the first Black congressman elected from Oakland, and then with Willie Brown, who eventually became the mayor of San Francisco. And I worked in national presidential campaigns while I was in California, and continued that work when I moved to New York. So that's in a nutshell, a little about me.
Yeah.
But then let's
Thank
talk
you.
about me
Yeah,
being a preservationist.
right. Yeah, and a pause because um what an amazing life journey. What live experiences. And it's very interesting because in some ways I don't know the Oakland city, but I've met people from there, and people are always saying it's in a way like a sister city or a sister place to Harlem or brother place to Harlem. So that energy, that community, that village, that Mecca, it's all of those things. But
Yeah, it was the place where the Black Panthers were founded.
absolutely,
And
absolutely.
I, like while I wasn't a member of the Panther Party, I knew them and collaborated with them on activations in the community. I worked across, when I was in grad school, I worked for a Black newspaper that was across the street from the church where the Panthers founded the breakfast program. And it was a wonderful experience to have lived through and been there during that early stage of the Black Panther Party.
Yeah, thank you. And like I said, I guess your book or your movie or your documentary has to come out because this is all part of our history. And if we don't tell our own stories, which this is Harlem Network News, and I'm Terry Wisdom, and I'm here with the Harlem Save Now people. Um,
Save Harlem Now.
Save Harlem Now. Let me get it right. Save Harlem Now. And that's with Valerie Jo Bradley and Claudette Brady. And so let's fast forward, Val. How did we get to the thought or the need for the organization? And then we're going to go to Claudette and segue her.
Well, I think I first got a recognition of historic preservation when some developers were going to knock down a building on my block. And I found out about it because I happened to be in Community Board 10's office. And as a journalist, journalists can read upside down.
Mhm.
And I read a paper on the desk while I was talking to whomever I was visiting at the time at
Okay.
Community Board 10, that there was a proposal to knock this building down on my block. And I wasn't having it. So I came back to the neighborhood. I let the people on the block know that this was happening. We organized and we stopped it. And now that building is a vibrant building. And in fact, Musa Jackson lives in that building.
Okay. Okay.
Uh, and it stands, it's vibrant, it's there. And I feel happy that we saved it. But I met Michael Adams during a political campaign for Peggy Shepard, who at the time was running for city council in West
Okay.
Harlem. And
Okay.
Michael Adams is a preservationist. And let me tell you, I think he single-handedly called attention to the beauty and the history and the need to preserve the buildings in Harlem, which were systematically being knocked down, disappeared, and abused. Um, we became close friends, and at one point in, I believe it was 2014, the Abyssinia Development Corp sold the building, the Renaissance Ballroom and Theater, I believe it was called.
And
And
people, I believe, called it the Rennie. You
the
know,
Rennie.
yeah, for sure. People call it the Rennie, and a lot of real
And
things
it
happened
was
there. Mhm.
why it was important was during the time people had this romance about uh, the Cotton Club, but what a lot of people don't realize is that African Americans could not be patrons in the Cotton Club. They could only work
True.
there and perform there.
Absolutely.
And where Black people got their dance and their groove off and heard music was at the Rennie. And the Rennie was a source of uh, entertainment, and it was it was a destination. Many people had their wedding receptions and their sweet 16 parties and their dances, and well-known music giants like Chick Webb uh, and many others, Louis Armstrong, whomever was in
Yeah,
town.
I think there were
They,
even plays there. I think the play The Blacks was there at some point, which
oh, I
they,
didn't know that
yeah,
the one by Jean Genet.
yeah, yeah. So I have
Anyway, the
to.
Renaissance was the place. The Renaissance was built by three Black men from Montserrat.
All right now.
And uh, they built the Rennie, and then it was a group of Black men who knocked it down. Uh, Michael Adams waged almost a one-man battle to try to call attention to the fact that
Mm,
it was going to be knocked down, and he every Sunday would be out in front of the Renaissance. And the
mhm.
first Sunday he was there, Abyssinia had him arrested, and we have a great photo that was in the Times
Okay. History
of
off of the
him
book and the documentary.
of him being arrested for protesting the demolition of the Renaissance Ballroom and Casino. That was the name, the Renaissance Ballroom and Casino. And it was after that he decided that a one-man battle was not going to stop the war, and that he needed to have a more organized effort. And so in my living room, in my brownstone on 120th Street, Save Harlem Now was born on April 2015. So we are celebrating our 10th year anniversary and we're going to be celebrating our 10th year anniversary all year long. And I guess later on, we'll be talking about how we kicked off our celebration
Okay.
of
Okay.
our 10th anniversary. We've
Yeah.
had some mild successes of getting neighborhoods and buildings landmarked. And landmarking is very important. It's not just about brick and mortar. It's also about saving history, because behind those
Preserving
walls,
history and culture.
right, history and culture, a lot of history and culture occurred in those buildings.
It certainly.
Anyway, so I should stop and let Claudette
Okay.
talk
Well,
now.
thank you. I mean, thank you for laying the foundation because one of the things, this is Harlem Network News, and I'm Terry Wisdom, and I am here with Valerie Jo Bradley and Claudette Brady. And I hope I say it right. Save Harlem Now.
Yep.
All right.
Excellent.
Save Harlem Now. And it's important to lay the foundation because I think one of the problems that we have, even with media, and just the regular news channels, cable, whatever, we're dealing with 2 minute sound bites for the most part. And it goes over people's heads. They don't have the background information. They may get a statement or misinformation, and then they take that as the truth because they heard it on the news. So it's important, especially because of our history, when we're talking about something, to lay the foundation and to not just gloss over things. We may know what Jet Magazine is, but we can't assume everybody knows. So we want people to be informed so that they can be engaged, so that they can be called to action. And on that note,
Let me just tell you about Jet Magazine. It was in Jet Magazine, the coverage of the murder of Emmett Till was covered, not in the way that it was covered in the mainstream press. We
mhm,
saw his body in the casket.
wow,
There were interviews with his mother, and it, I believe, began the formation of the 20th century civil rights movement. That one action, I guess
mhm,
Black people just said, no more, we can't
wow,
take it.
yeah,
But it
yeah,
was because we had this visual
mhm,
report
mhm,
and a very comprehensive report in Jet Magazine
mhm,
of Emmett Till's murder and death that
mhm,
the community all over the country, the Black community all over the country, and people who sympathized with our plight
mhm.
began to organize and have coordinated uh, efforts to fight against racism and discrimination.
Once again, Black media matters. We matter. You matter. We need your support. Um, as Roland Martin always says, bring your eyeballs, and it's not free to do this and all that. We have to, especially at this time, because silencing or the disappearance of Black media means that you're not going to see and hear what you need to see and hear. So, on that note, we're going to segue to Claudette Brady, the executive director of Save Harlem Now, and share with us, Claudette, who you are and whose you are, and what journey brought you to Save Harlem Now. And collaboration is a great thing. We have to do more of it. And also, just as a note, uh, Michael, the book. What is the name of his book?
Uh, Harlem Lost and Found,
Harlem
and
Lost and Found.
you can see it on Claudette's bookshelf there. Uh,
Okay. All
it's the
right now.
Bible of
Okay.
Harlem
Okay.
and its
So
building
so
and its social history.
okay, so y'all need to get that. So thank you, thank you, thank you. So Claudette.
Good afternoon, and thank you for having us. I'm Claudette Brady, the executive director of Save Harlem Now. I am originally from Jamaica, and I came here in 1969. My first summer here was spent with an aunt in Harlem on 119th Street off Lexington. But we lived in the Bronx. My first job was in Harlem. My freshman year summer, that summer, I worked at Abyssinian Baptist Church,
Okay.
and um, they had the summer youth programs, which was a part of a New York City programs where high school students would work. And I was a supervisor because I was a college student, but
Yes.
I was younger than all the other than the people I was supervising because I went to college earlier than 2 years earlier than most folks. And I also I did some volunteer work in the during the crack epidemic at Harlem Hospital.
Okay.
Just and they had volunteers just to come in and hold the babies.
Oh my goodness.
So I did that, and I actually did some volunteer work in Harlem at the Studio Museum in the 80s.
Hmm.
Um, so that's my original Harlem connection. Fast forward years later, when I was about in my early 30s, I bought a brownstone in Bedford Stuyvesant. and I
Okay.
was looking for a house, and I was actually looking in the Clinton Hill, Fort Greene area. I didn't know
Mm-hmm.
Bedford-Stuyvesant that well, with the exception that every year I would go to the African Street Fest, which
Mm-hmm.
back then it's now moved to the Navy Yard. Back then it was at Boys High School on the
Yeah.
field there.
Right.
So my view of Bedford Stuyvesant was not complete. I get off the train and walk down there. So pretty much I just saw the main drag. And the broker who was showing me houses said, um, I know what you want. I know what you're looking for. There's a house in Bed-Stuy. And I went to see the
Mm.
house, and I made an offer like right there. And
Mm.
well, I'd actually now driven in the neighborhood, and it was on this absolutely stunning block. Just this really interesting collection of townhouses, brownstones, bricks. Probably one of the most interesting collections of townhouses in Bedford Stuyvesant. So I moved to Bedford Stuyvesant in 1995. A few years later, I we had a block association that had been defunct for a while. So I founded the block, I restarted the block association. I got up one day, and a neighbor and I were talking. We decided there's some stuff going on that we wanted to deal with. We made some flyers, we found a place, and
Mm.
we
Okay.
started the block association again, and we did greenest block in Brooklyn, and we placed the
Mhm.
first year, and that was very exciting. And at a block association meeting, there was a gentleman there who said, and at this time now we're at about like 2007, where there's a lot of new construction going on. We had just done some rezoning to sort of protect the brownstone blocks with the community board.
Mm.
And he said, why don't we landmark the block? So near, previously in the 1970s, Stuyvesant Heights had been designated, the Stuyvesant Heights Historic District. And in 1994, there was a push to expand that district, which never happened. So I mean, I knew about landmarking, but I did not know the process. I thought it was,
Okay.
a unilateral process made by the Landmarks Preservation Commission, because that is how they actually did designations in the early years. They'd go out, they'd survey, then they would meet with the community and say, your block is worthy or this area is worthy. And
Right.
that's not how they were functioning anymore. And we were working on that premise. And so a neighbor of ours who was at the meeting knew the ladies from Crown Heights North, and they had just, which is right across Atlantic Avenue,
Mm.
and was called Bedford at one time, and then the names changed. And they sort of walked us through the process and introduced us to Historic Districts Council, which taught us how to go about designating. So we wound up getting um, two districts designated in Bedford Stuyvesant. During this process, I had met Michael Henry Adams. He was working with
Mm.
Bill Perkins
So
at the
he
time.
so he's a thread.
Yeah, so Michael
Definitely
and
a
I
thread.
have, there's a great Michael story.
Hmm.
And I'll tell this story. So in 2015, right? It was the 50th anniversary of the Landmarks Preservation Law. And Michael got the invitation to a symposium at the Museum of the City of New York, and said, "You don't have any people of color on this panel."
Mm.
And of course, he was outside protesting. I think he might have gotten arrested again, which
Ah.
so they invited me to come and speak on this panel sort of last minute. So that's one of my Michael stories. We've actually been at a bunch of protests and a bunch of meetings about changes in the landmarks law. Um, Around sometime after that, around I know the founding of Save Harlem Now, we had a mutual friend who had invited me to that meeting at Valerie's house. And I couldn't make it because I had to work late that day. So I never
Okay.
made that meeting.
Hmm.
Fast forward now to 2023. I was a board member of Historic Districts Council, and so was Angel Ayon, who is the vice president of Save Harlem Now, and
Mm-hmm.
we are at a function, and Angel mentions that Save Harlem Now is looking for an executive director. So I went home and I thought about it for like maybe 2 weeks because I was sort of semi-retired and I was living this life of teaching knitting and crochet and traveling to
Okay.
different
Uh-huh.
knitting and crochet
Still busy,
conventions.
busy.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
it was easy, right?
Right. Uh-huh.
Um, and so I thought about it for 2 weeks and I looked them up and I'm like, I can do this. And, and unfortunately, there are not a lot of African Americans in preservation who
Mm-hmm.
has had who has done the work
Mm-hmm.
of creating an historic district. The ones I know are the ladies in Crown Heights, and there are some ladies in Queens, but again, they're all retired, and they're still working in their areas. So I sent them my resume, and that's how I
Nice.
wound up here.
Okay. Well, I think it's interesting. I'm Terry Wisdom, and this is Harlem Network News, and we're here with Save Harlem Now. And I think it's interesting because there are a lot of connectors and threads. We're here with two women who had a vision and decided to buy a home, and that's not an easy feat, and had to do renovations and organizing blocks and getting crack out of the streets and all of those kinds of things. That is tenacity. Claudette, you said you came in 1969 from Jamaica, so there's a lot of spokes in terms of the connectors of doing things. And it's really important hearing these stories because I think it's critical that our young people hear these stories, because when you hear what people did or when you see what people did, then you can see how you can do it, so I think that's really critical. And we say Brooklyn, we say Harlem, but I look at it as Harlems of the world and
Yes,
really all over. Because even in a community that my family's in and has been in for a long time, Sag Harbor, there are groups out there, the Eastville Society, that are landmarking and had to landmark blocks and get signage, And so this is a process of how we can put a stamp on it, how we can save our communities, how we have history so our younger people know. And for me, just quickly, I grew up in Queens, but my parents both grew up in Harlem on 100 like 19th Street by Manhattan Avenue, which is probably now the boys girls club or something. But they grew up in the same building, so all my aunts and uncles knew each other. And then people moved out to one grandmother to Yonkers and one grandmother to St. Albans to another kind of Black historic district, Adderslade Park in
yes,
Queens. And my grandmother lived across the street from Mercer Ellington and up the street from Count Basie, Catherine and Count Basie. So there are these things, and there is that push for who we are. And then I'm one who came back to Harlem. You know, um, I've lived in Harlem quote, most of my adult life, or the borderline of Harlem, because I was on 157th and Riverside. So that's 2 blocks out. But I migrated my way down and also was able to do home stuff and brownstone stuff. And, so these are,
Stop being so modest. You purchased a brownstone and
yes,
you ran a guest house in your
yes,
brownstone. And you
yes,
taught me how to run a
yes,
guest house.
yes. And, in terms of collaboration, one of the reasons when you called me and said you wanted to come over and you wanted to know about how to do the guest house is I was very welcoming to that because there was a sister who was very welcoming to me. And I didn't know her at all or anybody that she knew. and I'm blanking on her name, but it's the sister that has the Aquaba House in Brooklyn.
Monique Greenwood.
Yeah, and a few others. And I
Yeah.
didn't even know her. And I called her. And I think at that time, like she had the Brooklyn one, she had one, she was getting ready to open in DC.
Yep.
And she found time in her schedule to come up to Al Brownstone and spend like 2 or 3 hours walking me through and telling me different stuff. So that's
And
the
that was the great thing about Terry. Other people who had guest houses or bed B&Bs would not give me the time of day, but Terry spent a day with me.
yeah, it's important. I mean, this is how, when one of us wins, we all win. And that's the way that we have to think collectively. You know what I'm saying? Being a lone soldier, just like you said with Michael, he realizing he can't do this by himself. And on that segue, because I want to get to some of the other things. There's so much, it's so rich. But what are some of the highlights that Save Harlem Now has done in the past?
Okay,
And what's yeah, let's talk about.
I'm happy to talk about that.
Okay, okay, great.
Our first historic district we were successful in getting designated was the 130th to the 132nd Street Historic District. And that district is so rich with history because it was near theaters that Black people ran back in the day and whatever that have since been knocked down and
Mm.
don't and no longer exist. And we started out in that venture and working with CB10's landmarking committee. CB10 had produced in 2012 a comprehensive preservation plan,
Mhm.
which
And this is
basically
community board 10, right? This is
Community
all.
Board 10,
Okay.
which basically went unrecognized by the Landmarks Preservation Commission until we came on board, tweaked it, started meeting with LPC. And so the first district that was designated was that district. Now, this is the district where the house where the March on Washington was planned exists.
Right.
It's on
Yeah.
100, it's at 170 West 130th Street. And during the March's 60th anniversary, we laid a marker there to note that. That march was planned primarily by Bayard Rustin, who pulled together, he and A. Philip Randolph
Yes.
pulled together the big six civil rights organizations, and they planned that march in 90 days. And all of the planning for that march came out of that house. Also, on that
And you
block
had a
is,
big celebration on the block.
yes, we
Yeah, that
did,
was amazing.
which became a mayoral event.
Mm-hmm.
The mayor came, and basically that was New York City's celebration of the March on Washington. While other people were in Washington, D.C., we were celebrating it at the site where it was planned. There's a lot of
Absolutely.
rich history in that. In 2020, we
And
produced a
just, I don't, to interrupt just for a moment, on that block also, and I don't know the
I
total.
was getting,
Oh,
don't,
go. You got it. Okay.
the New Amsterdam Musical Association is on that block. They are the first African American musical union in the country. And they were created because New York had enacted a law in which you could not perform in the clubs and other places in the city unless you had a union membership. And the white union would not let Black performers in the union. So they formed their own union in 1906. They bought the house in 1922.
Wow.
So they've owned the house for over 100 years, and they celebrated their 100th anniversary in 2022. at Harlem School of the Arts, and it was a fabulous event that they put together.
Beautiful. Beautiful.
But NAMA is what we call them, the New
Mhm.
Amsterdam Musical Association.
Mhm.
And great musicians like James Reese Europe, who was the one who uh, taught Europe about jazz when
Mm.
they were there during World War One. And people like Henry Minton, who was the owner of Minton's. He's been a president of
Minton's Playhouse.
NAMA, Minton's Playhouse.
Mhm.
And by the way, the last landmark we got designated was Minton's Playhouse in 2023.
Okay.
And
You've been
what
very good.
landmarking means is that
Mm.
presumably the buildings cannot be knocked down because they're protected. Now, let me give you an example of why this is important to Harlem. 66% of the buildings in the village are landmarked, so they're protected.
Mhm.
50% of the buildings in the Upper West Side and the Upper East Side are landmarked. Less than 20% of the buildings in Harlem are landmarked. And that number was increased after Safe Harlem Now was formed and started getting historic districts. So it's important if we want to save our history, if we want to save our neighborhoods and preserve the integrity of the
Mhm.
historic buildings that are in this neighborhood,
Mhm. Very
then
good.
you've got to protect them primarily with landmarking. That's why it's important. If people were wondering, well, why do this?
Why do it?
That's why it's
And
important.
Valerie, may I add, when it comes to Harlem, because of Harlem was the place of the great migration from the South, from the West Indies. There was this
Mhm.
concentration of knowledge and art and talent. I mean, that's the Harlem Renaissance.
Yes,
So
absolutely.
in if you take the 130th West 130th to 132nd um, Street Historic District, and you
Mhm.
look at who lived there, like everybody who lived in that district was an artist or a doctor or a musician who have contributed significantly to the social, political, and economic life of this country. So unlike a lot of
Absolutely.
other places where we're designating great buildings, we're also designating great buildings where great things happened.
Yeah, and a lot of great things happen. So it's very important that we continue to tell our story. There was a great series on PBS that Henry Louis Gates did, which was The Great Migration. And I encourage everybody to see it because there's a part one and a part two. And you just look at us, and we are American history. We are resilient people, um, and we keep coming. And
African American history is American history.
yes, it is. It absolutely is. It absolutely.
So another historic district that we were involved in collaborating with some other organizations uh, that got designated is the Dorrance Brooks Historic District. The Dorrance Brooks, what's the third name? It's another
Right.
name that
Where
I Square,
That's out
Dorrance
in
Brooks
Queens.
Square. No,
No?
it's in
Oh,
Harlem.
okay. Okay. Yeah.
Uh,
My
we
things.
deal with Harlem.
I'm getting my
Anyway,
things mixed up because there's a Dory Miller area in the
no,
Elmhurst.
this is
Yeah,
Dorrance
gotcha.
Brooks.
Gotcha.
And
So break it down. Break it down. Where's it?
Shirley Chisholm used to be a teacher in that district, in a school in that district.
Okay.
Okay. Other people did significant things from that district. There's some incredible uh, and wonderful faith-based institutions that exist in that district. And it's the first historic
What are
district in
the
New
what are
York.
the perimeters of the street name?
Claudette, what are the parameters?
off the streets?
Yes.
I don't remember
Approximately.
off the top of my head, but now I can do a commercial. So if you go to our website, We have maps of the historic districts.
Okay.
We have the designation report, so you can read all about the buildings and the people who live there. And over the course of this year, we will be doing some online Zoom um,
Mhm.
seminars about the historic districts and the people who live there.
Okay. Well, thank you for
So the Dorrance Brooks was a very important milestone to get designated. We also got the Harlem Branch Library, where Langston Hughes and I don't know why I'm blanking on names now.
not
Langston Hughes.
Zora.
No, not Zora. Uh, um, James Baldwin.
James
James
Baldwin, okay.
Okay.
That was the library they used because they live near that library.
Mm.
It's across the street from Marcus Garvey Park on 124th Street, between Fifth Avenue and Mount Morris
Got it.
Parkway.
Okay. Right over there.
Okay.
Mhm.
Yes, it's an important, and also the Harlem Writers Guild used to hold their meetings there. And there was a theater, which I understand that Ossie Davis and Ruby Dee and others like them used to perform and hone their craft in that
Mm.
auditorium. The auditorium has been
Mm.
since been renovated into a computer center for the
Mhm.
library. But I
Mhm.
remember when the Mount Morris Park Community Improvement Association used to
Mhm.
hold its monthly meetings at that library in that auditorium where that stage existed. So we have a proposed historic district that we're working on now,
Mhm.
the Manhattan Avenue North Historic District, which includes Morningside, Manhattan Avenue,
Okay.
uh,
One
and
119th, 120th,
Mhm.
and 121st.
Okay. Excellent. Excellent. Did you have anything to do with Hamilton, any of the Hamilton Heights landmarking?
no, we didn't, but one of
Okay.
our co-founders did. Ewan
Okay.
Chin with
Okay.
the West
Okay.
Harlem
Great. Yes.
Community
Okay.
Preservation
Mm.
Organization was responsible for getting Hamilton Heights and the Sugar Hill historic districts designated in that area. And our
Mhm.
first vice president of Save Harlem Now was Ewan
Mhm.
Chin.
Okay. Okay, great. Yeah. Because that's when we were up in that 147 area. And I just want to say briefly, because we want to get to the present and the event that you all just had. But some of the things with the landmarking, and this is like a building thing, maybe like there's certain facades you can't change, or you have to put in, the kind of windows that were in before. So those are some of the tweaks. But
Yeah, I would like for Claudette to explain the different kinds of
okay.
landmark
Thank you.
designations that you can
Okay.
get.
Okay, thank you, Claudette.
So we have their historic districts, interior landmarks, and scenic landmarks. So historic
And
district
individual landmarks.
and individual landmarks. So
Okay, thank
the
you.
branch library that Valerie mentioned, that's an individual landmark. The Empire State Building is an individual landmark.
Mm,
Scenic landmarks, Central Park is a scenic landmark. There
mhm,
is Coney Island, Cyclone, and the Boardwalk are scenic landmarks. Uh,
okay.
when an individual building or there is a historic district that's landmark, there are restrictions on changes that they can do. And you do not necessarily have to put in the same windows that the windows need to have the look and feel of the
Mm,
original windows because there
okay.
is understanding that there are newer materials that
Mhm,
are easier to work with, that are more
right.
weather resistant, and
Mhm,
actually wood is actually a great window material because wood is not conductive. So wood
Mhm.
does not conduct heat or cold in and out of your building.
Interesting, interesting.
Um, if you're doing something like replacing a cornice on a roof, um, you can now do it with a molded fiberglass rather than having somebody do a tin one, which
Mhm.
I don't think there are people who have that skill anymore. So, and most of the processes are fairly easy. If you're replacing your windows or doors, it's, you show the pictures and it's done. And for the most part, most people don't do much to their buildings.
Mhm. Yeah,
They,
they want to
yeah,
keep the look, and I mean, I think it's beautiful. We've got such great buildings here in New York City, particularly in Harlem and
yeah,
particularly in the Brooklyn segments, and it can just be a
What's
wonderful.
so interesting about those neighborhoods is that it's low rise development.
Yeah,
So now let's fast forward to
yeah. Let's
now
fast forward because we got to get to the.
where developers are
Let's
now
go.
putting up these 30-story buildings or
Or trying
whatever.
to.
And
Yeah.
they're throwing them up in the middle of a community that's
Hmm.
low rise and has uniformity with
Hmm.
historic buildings. And most people are saying, we don't want that. Not to not to also count the fact that
Hmm.
what's being built, most people who live in Harlem can't even afford them because the rents are so high.
Hmm. Hmm.
They say they are affordable, but we have to question affordable for whom?
For whom? Yeah, and
Yes.
we're gonna jump in. That's gonna be jumping into that for our end. But you all are doing a lot, and I want to get to the present, the most recent present, so that we can get that in. But I know that you had an event over this past weekend, and I'll let you share about it. It was at the.
Okay.
Tell us what it was, where it was, and then
Okay,
I'm
this
gonna.
was the kickoff of our 10th anniversary, and we chose to celebrate Langston Hughes's birthday. He was born on February 1st,
All right.
1902.
Woo.
And he has a house that's located at 20 East 127th Street between Madison and 5th. It still stands. It was landmarked in 1980. There's a plaque on it that acknowledges the fact that it's a landmark. And this is where he lived for the last 20 years of his life. So we had a
Mm.
big birthday party.
All right.
We had spoken word artists who spoke Langston's words and spoke their own words. We had a jazz trio, the Ahmad Johnson trio, some young up and coming uh, musicians who are incredible who've been
Mm.
at uh, jazz at Lincoln Center. Uh, they've played other prestigious performance spaces, and they were great. And then we had spoken word artists like um, Isler. Well, let me read his name.
Ah,
Uh, his name is Luther Isler.
oh yes, Luther. Yes, Luther.
Luther, the
Yes,
artist Anubis.
yes. And Luther
And
comes. We were speaking, and we're jumping all around. Everything's connected. I'm Terry Wisdom. This is Harlem Network News, and I'm here with Save Harlem Now. And Luther is also. We're going to see a little clip shortly. But Luther is also was came out of the Impact Theater. And
yes,
they have like captains of people. And when my granddaughter Sahara was part of Impact Theater, Luther was her captain. So that's how I had to
okay.
interact a lot with him, because
Well,
Impact.
I think Luther started with them when he was 12 years old. And in the
Wow.
film that was done on Langston, he's in the
Okay.
film and he's about 12 years old.
Nice, nice. He's amazing.
But now he has his own organization
Mhm.
that's doing great work
Yeah.
with young adult and teenage artists who
Mhm.
want to be poets and
Mhm.
writers. And Luther is also a member of the Venerable uh, Harlem Writers Guild, which John
Okay,
O'Killens
beautiful.
founded
Yeah, there's
and
ooh,
also operated out of Harlem.
okay. So
But
I'm
we
a,
had,
go ahead,
let
I'm
me
sorry.
just say that we also had Sister Zoc performing. She grew up in Harlem, right on Fifth Avenue in a brownstone with her father. Her father used to work with me when I was involved uh, with the Mount Morris Park Community Improvement Association. And Sister Zoc is a well-known spoken word and performance artist. And we are co-sponsoring an event at Minton's on February 23rd
Okay.
featuring her, and we're one of the major co-sponsors of the event. And I'd like to encourage people to come out to that event. Our event, there are two sets. Our set that we are co-sponsoring is from 7:30 to 11 o'clock at
Mhm.
Minton's Playhouse. You
Okay.
can go to Minton's Playhouse to purchase tickets, or you can go to our website, and our website, which is saveharlemnow.org, can take you directly to the site to purchase tickets for the Minton's event, which is February the 23rd. Daniel Beatty,
Hmm.
Obie award-winning playwright and winner as a single artist,
Hmm.
also delighted us with a performance. He is the person who's going to be succeeding Vosa Rivers, who
Okay.
is
Yes.
the
The new federal.
chief
Yes.
executive officer
Uh-huh.
for the New Heritage
Yeah, New
Theater
Heritage.
Group,
Yes, New Heritage.
which has produced a wonderful
Hmm.
film, which I will now hand over to Terry to talk
Okay.
about.
Okay. So as we can see, this February 1st, very befitting, the beginning of Black History Month, and for it to be Langston Hughes' birthday, that is amazing. And so
Absolutely.
it's amazing,
But let me just say that we
serendipitous.
also we're celebrating for the whole year the 100th
I love
anniversary
it.
of the
I
Harlem
love
Renaissance
it. Hmm.
and the 60th anniversary of the signing of the Landmarks Law.
Okay. So it's all coming together. So we're going to just show a very short clip of this film. And what is the title of the film? I'm sorry.
The title of the film is Hughes's Dream Harlem, and it was produced by the New Heritage theater group. Vosa Rivers is the executive director. I mean, is the executive producer,
Producer. Yeah.
and Jamal Joseph was
Hmm.
the director and filmmaker
Okay.
of this film. And it was a film that was produced in 2002, and I don't know why in the world I missed it in 2002.
Yeah,
And I
I
found
missed it.
it
I
in
didn't even really. So I mean, this is why like Harlem Network News is and all of our media is so important because this is about preserving our history. And it's about getting that to our young people so they know. It's telling our stories, and we have to tell our own stories. So, without further ado, and I understand that you shared a clip of this film at the event that you had at the Langston Hughes House.
absolutely. We did 20
Okay.
minutes of it.
Okay. And just to get some clarification, the Langston Hughes House, you said it was landmarked in 1980, correct?
Yes.
And I
Yes.
know that there was been a struggle because there's a family that I guess lives there and is the owners or caretakers of the Langston Hughes House. And I know that there was a struggle to just not get that house knocked down, or I don't know what all the things are, and I don't want to go far into it. But was Save Harlem Now involved in making sure that this place remained? Did you all have any?
We had nothing to do with the landmarking. How
Okay.
there were people whose shoulders we stand on who worked on that, just
Mhm.
like they got the Marcus Garvey Park Fire Watch Tower, the Mount Morris Fire Watch Tower
Okay.
landmark. I was involved in that. But there
Okay.
were other people who preceded me
Mhm.
who got it landmarked. And it
Okay.
was landmarked in, I believe, 19.
A joyous point of the day to get out into the community and go and say hello to Mrs. So and so or Mr. So and so, or go down the street and be quiet and not announce that he was coming, so he could really just see Harlem. George said to Mr. Hughes, "Mr. Hughes, did you see so and so and so and so and so?" Mr. Hughes said, "No, I didn't see that." "Well, Mr. Hughes, certainly you saw so and so across the street." Didn't see that. "Well, Mr. Hughes, what did you see?" "I saw everything you didn't see."
There is a comfort walking among your people.
The voice
There are
of the great
1,000
Woody
stories.
King.
There are
Jr.
so
There we
many
go.
ways to relate to people you love. He loved Black people. And I think Langston, with his travels, his adapting of Cuban works and translations, his vast experience in Russia and other places, made him a very unique Harlemite.
Langston was the bubble in the belly of Harlem, the most enthusiastic, wide open, happy, humorous, grinning person you could ever meet.
I thought he was very handsome. He was outgoing and he was pleasant to be around, and he laughed a lot. He liked to laugh, and he liked to make people laugh. He looks at life kind of with a wink in his eye. I didn't know him well enough to know exactly what kind of man he was, yet I know him precisely what kind of man he was because his work showed it. I know that he was a caring man. I know that he was a politically astute. I know that he was socially aware. I know that he was a lover of people and places and sounds. He reminds me, I think, of a big ear. He went around the world, especially in Harlem, and he heard everything.
Langston Hughes attended Columbia University for a year to study engineering. He left because he was bored and lonely in the white academic world. But his nightly visits down the hill made him fall in love with the excitement, rhythms, and syncopation of Harlem and its people.
So we're gonna stop this. That was a sneak peek. That was amazing. And it's just amazing that that footage even exists and the way it was put together. So we have a lot. We have a lot of richness, and we need to preserve it. And that's amazing that you were able to screen that. And that's a sneak preview. So Boza and New Heritage Theater and Jamal Joseph of Impact, we're looking for the screening of this. So where we can see it, it's amazing. Claudette,
Yes.
you shared all this knowledge that you have and accrued and doing it. And if you don't mind, this is Terri Wisdom, Harlem Network News. What was your profession and your background, and how did that interact with you know?
So I actually started out in fashion, which was not a pleasant experience. If you ever saw The Devil Wears Prada,
Ah,
okay, so The Devil Wears Prada with a 5'2" black woman.
gotcha.
It gets worse. Um, and I sort of stumbled into IT.
Hmm.
So I was an IT project manager for a good 20 years. And I had a major health crisis and just decided that I was not going to go back um, to work in that field. I sold my house
Hmm.
and I had a yarn shop for a few years because
Okay,
I've always
I love
been
it.
a knitter and crocheter, and I teach knitting. I do some designs for mostly collaborating with friends of mine who are independent yarn dyers.
Whoa, okay.
So that was what I was doing when I ran into Save Harlem Now.
Okay, okay. Well, I love it, and I think it's very, very important, especially for younger people who are just getting to paint the canvas of their life and be the architects of their life, to see how many different things you can do. You know, it's not necessarily, especially now, not the one career and the gold watch at the end, but you know, people are able to do many, many things and have many, many lives. So we're gonna really wind down. I thank you for sharing about Save Harlem Now, and certainly we're going to have you as regulars so folks can know and know what's happening. And I just want to give I can't even really talk about it, but it's very interesting. That's a whole nother show. But last night we had at Community Board 10 a very robust audience with the community board and the executive board, and it had to do with the 145 project. And I'm a former member of Community Board 10. I was on for 2 years, and you know, and so it was interesting because the 145 project, which is a big, the 34-story towers, two buildings, so on and so forth. It came to the community board a couple of years ago, and it was rejected. And I don't know if it was rejected in the city council, the borough president, whatever, whatever. But it's come back, and it's supposed to be like a new and improved project, but it's kind of not. But one of the concerns, which I think is a concern of the landmarking as well, is like bringing these big towers into the community, just to simplify it. And, you know, the people own the land, so they could, you know, do kind of what they want in a way, but not. But it's bringing these huge towers into the community, which is going to bring like how many more thousand people. The infrastructure of the subways hasn't changed. The environmental concerns, the blockage of the sun, you know, because like you said, there's low rise. But then there's the other elephant in the room, which you could say is, quote, gentrification, because even though they're mandated to have a certain percentage of the AMI or whatever it is, people, the percentage on this was like, I think it was like 38. I don't even know if it was 38%.
It
Yeah,
was 80.
38% of affordable. But affordable is not affordable for the people living in Harlem, the Black and brown people. We got to say it because it's what it is. And one of the things that we truly have to look at is that our city comptroller gave a speech at NAN, at Reverend Al Sharpton's place, and spoke about the mean income, and this is for New York State, for Blacks in New York State is $19,000. And the mean income for whites in New York State is $220,000. And when I heard that, I called his press secretary because I didn't want to misspeak. You know, if I'm on the air and I'm saying things, that sounded crazy, but that is a reality. So it really
Hmm.
shows you why things are the way they are. The gap is so huge. It even shows you why would there be a need for reparations? I mean, look at this gap. But if we are having an AMI or whatever it is, and like Westchester County and wherever else is bundled into what our salary is, it's never going to be fair. It's never going to be equal. It's going to displace people. It's going to impact our politics when these people come in. So there's a lot to look at, but just quick, because we can't talk about it. That's a whole nother conversation.
So I just want to I just want to make a comment on this because a lot of people don't actually look at the long-term impacts
Mhm.
of gentrification. So, well, there is the political impact. There's the immediate impact of, let's say, this particular building that's huge and out of scale. Um,
Yes.
but we have things like the long-term impact. So one of the things that Save Harlem Now has been doing this year is that we have been holding workshops for homeowners about different financial benefits that they can get. One of
Okay.
them is the homeowner tax credit, which
Mhm.
they use whether for both interior and exterior restoration of historic buildings. Eligibility for those tax credits is based on the census tract you live in.
Mm.
And what happens is when that income in that census tract rises, the long-term residents, the old brownstoners, don't have, no longer qualify for that tax credit.
Mm.
It also changes um, federal dollars for
Why is that? Because I'm not really following.
the tax credits, a lot of tax credits and programs are for underserved communities. All
Uh-huh.
right, and underserved communities, um, part of the criteria is income levels. Their
Okay.
income levels there are demographic. So I was actually talking to someone who worked at Harlem Hospital, and
Mhm.
a lot of the programs that they got federal funding for, they no longer got federal funding for
The neighborhood.
because the
Okay.
neighborhood changed.
Got it.
And what
Got it.
happens
Got
when we have this? So a good deal of people who leave Harlem, right, and other areas in New York City are actually middle income people
it.
who
Mhm.
are looking for home ownership and looking for schools.
Mhm.
So we lose our middle income people, and then we have now this greater disparity of the
Mhm.
new residents who are extremely high income or high
Right.
income
Yes.
and or low
Yes.
income residents who now desperately need these services,
Yeah.
but they no longer, the district and the schools no longer qualify for these programs, and these people who have moved in do not live in the district. They sleep in the district. Their kids go to school elsewhere.
Right. Yes. 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 Yeah. So we have a lot to unpack, and I know zoning had a lot to do with what was being talked about last night.
yes.
I'm just paraphrasing quick, but one thing that I will say, as Community Board 10 voted no with conditions, when initially it was said it was yes, I really felt proud that people stood up and were looking at what it is, even if it's not the whole thing.
Hmm.
Because I think it's very important at this time that we pay attention. It looked like there was over 100 people at the meeting, which says people came out. Um, and it's important that we pay attention, that we move together, and Lenox Terrace is a pure example of people who banded together when the owners wanted to put 5 other buildings on the property. And it was interesting because there were meetings uptown at Schaumburg, and then they changed the meeting to downtown, wherever near City Hall. And believe me, those 90-year-olds got on buses and went down there
Hmm.
and were heard. So I
We
think,
provided buses for them. We worked
yes,
with
okay, okay,
interfaith
okay.
uh, uh, Ministers Association. They
Mhm.
provided the buses, bus the
Okay,
people down there.
all
We
right.
worked with them. We did. We made testimony, and we were very supportive of that zoning variance not being accepted.
Yes. So thank you. So the point is, because we can't even go into that whole story, but the point is that when people band together, because even on Community Board 10, one of the proudest things that I felt we did, that I was a part of, was when we got the gate at Central Park, for the gate of the exonerated, with the exonerated five. And that was a 2-year process of meetings. And no gate had been named in Central Park in 150 years. So it's kind of like when people say this can't happen or it won't happen because if this doesn't happen, but we've got to take initiative. And that's really what it's all about. You all in Save Harlem Now have taken initiative, and you continue to take initiative, and you continue to build community. So I feel that is so important. And it's to get that information out there for younger people to know what is happening, how it can happen. This is how we're going to move forward. So, on that note, if you all would just share how folks can get in touch with Save Harlem Now, and how you're able to keep going, some of your funding processes. You don't have to take your sheets off, but just to understand, how does something like this occur?
So the first thing is to go to our website, www.saveharlemnow.org. We have a membership program, or memberships start at $25, and there are a couple of perks with that, and go up from there. And for members, they get early notification for events. And this would be a great year to become a member, because this is going to be a year packed full of celebrations and events. And I just want to mention, since that we're here on this call, one of the initiatives that we will be working on this year is the community engagement around the Harlem African Burial Ground, which is at 126th Street and 2nd Avenue under the decommissioned bus depot. So, and when you go to the website, you join us, you can volunteer, make sure to join our mailing list, because we will be sending out emails about the Harlem African Burial Ground Project, about work that we're going to be doing. And as I said, this year, it's going to be packed full of events like the one that we had on Saturday, music and art and education.
Okay. Well, thank you. Valerie Jo Bradley, would you like to give any closing remarks?
Well, you wanted to know how we are surviving. We have received grants from the Ford Foundation and from the National Trust for Historic Preservation, from State Senator Cordell Clear, from Council Member Christian Richardson Jordan, and we hope to expand our funding mechanisms this year and in future years, but we got a great start. We have Claudette because of a National Trust for Historic Preservation grant, which allowed us to hire an executive director.
Okay. Well,
And we are hoping to continue to hold programs that are both informative and useful for the people who live in Harlem, for the people who own homes in Harlem, people who own businesses, people who rent in Harlem. This all helps people. Affordable housing can remain affordable with buildings that still stand. We don't have to build brand new buildings. We just have to maintain and improve the buildings we have. And we could have affordable housing. And that's one of our positions. And so as we move on, we hope that people will support us and attend our events and thus benefit from the work we do.
okay. Well, thank you for that. I'm Terri Wisdom, and this is Harlem Network News. And this has truly been a robust conversation and quite informative and very important in terms of how we build our businesses, how we fund what we do. I'm going to make sure I get together and talk with y'all because Black media matters. Harlem Network News matters. We've got to structure it. We ask for Zelle and, Cash App and donations is very, very important. But this year, and our GoFundMe, but this year in our 2025, it's going to be about building that bank because we have to. It's the only way that we're going to be able to continue and pierce the veil. And it's not only us. That's a way of suppressing news and information by suppressing the Black media, and we can't let that happen. So thank you so much, and we'll be in touch. It's been great. Thank you. Okay.
Thank you, Terry. We appreciate you, and we
Okay.
appreciate Harlem Network News.
And I love learning. I always learn something when I interview people, and that's what I love. So thank you. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Or whatever, backward never takes a village, and so goes Harlem, so goes the world. That's James Baldwin. Oh yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.